Hi, and welcome to my sci-fi, fantasy, and horror short fiction roundup, which includes stories I read and loved in May 2023. And in this roundup, as I do every now and then in my roundups, I've got a lot of stories to cover here. So my first story pick for this roundup is Any Percent by Andrew Dana Hudson in Giganotosaurus. And I really have to say, if you haven't read Giganotosaurus ever, or if you haven't read it recently, go and check out the stories. They're really publishing some story over there. So this story is just an amazing roller coaster ride of a story. It takes you into the life, or rather, lives of Luckless, a man who plays the game Any Life reality and can live countless lives in mere minutes and hours. In this game, you can be many things and you can strive for many different goals, and one of the ultimate goals for many players is to reach economic victory, to become the richest person in that in-game world and to do it in the shortest possible time. Now, Luckless becomes obsessed with reaching that goal, and it ends up costing him, not just in the game, but in his real life. And I've read a lot of great stories that deal with games and virtual reality and how they can intersect and affect our lives. And Hudson's story really takes some interesting and unique twists and turns along the way, spinning a multifaceted and deeply thought-provoking tale. As Luckless spirals into his obsession with beating the game and winning, he abandons the relaxed way he used to play and enjoy Any Life. He also tries every trick he knows and every trick he learns in order to reach the top. And eventually, he does find a rather revolutionary way to win. I love how Hudson shows us that while the game is a simulation of real life, it also has the potential to affect Luckless and other players in real, profound, and life-changing ways. My next story pick for this month is Bruised Eye Dusk by Jonathan Louis Duckworth in Beneath Ceaseless Skies. And this is a story about Rug the Spellbreaker. I just love the opening. Rug the Spellbreaker was only passing through the Devil's Palm on his way down to the coast, where he hoped to find his mother. He'd have avoided Ganville, except he was running low on boom powder and salt, and the little settlement was the last tame place before a lot of nowhere. So, after reading this wonderful and absolutely captivating story, I would like to follow Rug the Spellbreaker and his gator tugboat anywhere, anytime. Duckworth spins just a hugely enjoyable tale where there is magic, sweet and sour, and where people are trying to find a way to live their lives in peace after war and tribulation. The language here is an utter joy to read and a prime example of how to weave and stitch the world building into the fabric of your prose and your story. My next story is An Atlas of Names and Footprints and Thoughts Unsaid by Carly St. George in IZ Digital. Now, IZ Digital is the digital offshoot of Interzone magazine. It publishes fiction and nonfiction from all over the planet, and every story is illustrated with full-color art. It's a really excellent publication. In this story, this story is just an absolute gosh darn delight. It's a story about monster hunting, about investigations and deductions, about ghosts and demons, murders, and sharp, sharp teeth. But most of all, this is an intricately woven, complex, and conflicted love story between Chim Chim, that's how I'll choose to pronounce it, who is not quite human, and has kept things about her true nature from yesterday, And the relationship between them is deep and profound, but also fraught with things unsaid and undone. This makes for a gorgeous tale with all its monsters and all its longing, spoken and unspoken. My next story pick is A Toitele by Celia Rostow in The Dark. Rostow herself describes this gorgeously wrought story about a ghost and a ghostly lover as queer Jewish erotic horror, and that it is. It's also a story about tight-knit and fracturing relationships, including the relationship between David and Rochel in their marriage, and between Rochel and Chana, who were once the closest of friends before life separated them. So there is a very vivid ghost in the story. And I love the darkness and the fire here. I love the way the story captures Rochel's complicated and complex feelings about her own identity, her place in the world, and her feelings for her husband, David, and her friend, Chana. It's a really excellent read. I love ghost stories, and this is such an excellent ghost story. My next story pick is one of the older stories that I mentioned. It's from last year. It's The Pigeon Keeper's Daughter by Su Yi Lin in Strange Horizons. I can't properly describe how much I love this gentle, quiet, utterly gorgeous, and utterly devastating story. There is shape-shifting and magic here. There is a quiet life lived on the outskirts of society. There is the sound of birds and the memories they evoke. And there is a longing and the lost memories of a past that the protagonist cannot quite grasp. I don't know how quite to convey just how amazing this story is, but it is one of the most beautiful and emotionally powerful stories I've read in a long time. My next story pick is The Miraculous Account of Kaja Bayrak, Pennant Saint of Zabel, and it's by Tanvir Ahmed, and it's also from Strange Horizons. Tanvir Ahmed writes prose that enchants and glitters, that has the texture and gloss of fairy tale, myth, and history, while telling stories that feel brand new and ancient all at the same time. I read and loved Ahmed's story in The Deadlands, a dervish among the graves of Ghazni, and this story in Strange Horizons is just as lush, just as fierce, and just as devastatingly gorgeous. My next story pick is Every Time the Circus Comes to Town by Fred Coppersmith in Etheria magazine. And it starts with the line, "Every time the circus comes to town, someone dies." So Coppersmith puts his own unique spin on the cursed traveling circus here. And it happens in a tale that blends fantasy with strands of horror. This circus is a place where magic is at work and where someone must die and where death will always get their due. And this is a fate that follows the circus for a long time, but then something happens. A new employee at the circus turns the tables on the curse and on death itself. I love the Bradbury-esque vibes here and the gentle way that Coppersmith inverts and subverts some well-known genre tropes in this story. My next story pick is The Bleak Communion of Abandoned Things by Ariel Markin-Jack, narrated by Kitty Sarkozy, and it's in Pseudopod. And yes, I do love haunted house stories, and this haunted house story is magnificent. Here, the person moving in to the haunted house actually welcomes the haunted presence in the house, and soon establishes a close relationship with it as she cleans and dusts and fixes up the old abandoned house. But few things come without a price, and sometimes, when something seems too good to be true, it really, really is. There's an undercurrent of sometimes dysfunctional love to this horror that is beautifully subversive as it explores profound feelings of both loneliness and belonging. My next story pick is She Blooms and the World is Changed by Izzy Wasserstein in Lightspeed. And it has this beautiful line in it. I was 6 months old when we landed on Lilith. Sira was born 3 years later. Now I wonder, was I born too soon? Or was she born too late? This is a fantastic, gripping, thought-provoking story about two sisters and the new planet their parents have brought them to. While the parents tried their best to shield the planet, Lilith, from any interference and contact with the family, the sisters take a different path. What's happening to the younger sister is really proof that contact has already occurred, whatever their intentions. And there are some questions being asked here. Can we cut ourselves off from a world and just observe it? Can we live? Should we even try to live without changing and being changed by the world around us? Wasserstein's story is a beautiful exploration of change, the fear of change, and what we can find on the other side of that fear. And my next story pick is A Chestnut, a Persimmon, and a Cunning Lie. This story is by Michelle Denham and narrated by Isabel Kim, and it's in Podcastle. I love this story. It is a fairy tale tinged story about two sisters. Again, got some siblings in this roundup, and a mother who all find a way to live and make a family at what is really the edge of a precipice. Because the older sister here is a monster, a tiger-hearted girl. There are so many facets and so many layers to this story. It's about deception in order to survive. It's about violence and power in a family and in a society and so on. And it's also about how do we see those around us? And how are they and we changed by how we see them? And Denham's story, it's both gorgeous and powerful as it delves deep into one family and the power of truth and the power of lies. My next story pick is Jar by Aaron Brown in the Deadlands. I adore this beautifully strange and gorgeously crafted short story by Brown. Now, there's a good amount of body horror here, some rather gory details, but they are set in a story that seems to me to be about the transcendence and the transformation we might undergo after death. And it dives deep into a metaphysical reality beyond the horror of decay and beyond digested bodies, because that is what is happening inside the jar. I particularly like how Brown makes the ritual, the transformation of death and digestion, so visceral in its details and yet also so lyrical. It's a truly unique take on the afterlife and a must-read as far as I'm concerned. My next story pick is Carapace by Angela Sylvain in Dose of Dread from Dreadstone Press. This is a lovely slice of unsettling and surreal darkness that feels like it pays an almost tongue-in-cheek homage to Kafka. I love the deceptive simplicity of the story and how that simplicity hides layers of meaning and horror, all lurking beneath the surface. My next story pick is Come Out by Mina Chang in Radon Journal. This is an excellently creepy and unsettling slice of science fiction flash. Motherhood can be dangerous and have unexpected consequences, as we find out here. And I love the way Chang blends love and longing with fierce, even obsessive determination. My next story pick is also from Radon Journal, and it's Money Thirst by Eva Papasoliotti. And I'll read a quote from the story. Water is overrated, they say, and you agree. You've been drinking nothing but water for the past year and think, well, you can easily do without. For this kind of money, you definitely can. So yeah, what if you could earn a lot of money just by never drinking water again? This story is a wicked sharp tale about a near future where the protagonist signs a lucrative contract with an energy drink manufacturer, but the terms of the contract might be more than they bargained for. Now, everything in this story is sharp and jagged, and it has such a deliciously dark and sinister vibe. What can I say? I just love the pitch black sense of humor here and the way it cuts so close to the bone. My next story pick is How to Stay Married to Baba Yaga by S.M. Hallow in Baffling Magazine. This is a beautifully layered and thoroughly devastating story about Baba Yaga, written as a list of tips. And tip number 7, for example, starts off, in the woods, in the dark, your heart thuds and your breath makes ghosts in the starlight. Nothing here will harm you, but when you stand between white pillars of petrified sycamores, you feel the way you did the night you met her, when you were just another Vasilisa, another Yelena, another Maria, another Ivan Ivanovich, another lost soul in a litany of lost souls whose skulls stake the path to her door. Don't ever forget how your story started. Oh, it is so good. And I just love, there's such richness in this story and the way it brings together different versions and parts of the tale of Baba Yaga into a new whole. And there's an emotional depth where love and pain and fear run through everything. Hallow uses the old expertly and makes it into something new and heartrending. My next story pick is Quandary Aminu versus the Butterfly Man by Rich Larson. Scary. And in Larson's brutally entertaining science fiction tale, we follow Quandary Aminu, who is trying to survive the butterfly man sent to kill her. To quote the story, just might survive. It's a high-powered, fast-moving story with a squishy, regenerative story about the way time is and the way it is experienced differently by various creatures in various parts. Here, Liu explores the concept that a creature's metabolic rate is linked. This is a lovely and just riveting story, lovely story about a place. She scrubs away these scales on the women who come to the bathhouse and also ponders her own scales. Kim tells this story with such a gentle and insightful and them more freedom. And that was my last story pick, and thanks so much for listening, and I'll be back next month. Thank you.